Conversations on the environment. Welcome to the third in a series of thought-provoking conversations on our environment. I see many of you were here with us with Majora Carter, and I have good news for you. She's coming back. Hold the date, Friday, April the 25th. Kansas City, Missouri will be holding a day-long session to get your ideas about how to apply green solutions and help reduce our storm, water, and sewer problems and create multiple benefits. All Kansas City, Missourians want to do that. We are having a green summit on April the 25th. It will be led by our own brilliant facilitator. Stand up, Bob Burkabaugh. And while I'm doing that, I just see that Kathy Shields, the former county executive of Jackson County, the greenest county in America, stand up. She started it all. Okay. Majora will help us see how green-collar jobs can be created to help integrate green solutions, so please mark your calendars. We need your ideas now. So it's now my pleasure to introduce our host of the finest, greatest library system in urban America, Mr. Crosby Kemper III.
I want to thank our co-sponsors for tonight's event. First of all, I want to say the sponsors of the overall Conversations with the Environment program are Astra Enterprises, BNIM, and its leader, Mr. Green, Bob Burkabaugh, the Kansas City Business Journal, Rainy Day Books, the Kansas City Public Television, Bridging the Gap, Greenability Magazine, and the city of Kansas City, Missouri, which is making a major effort to become one of the greenest cities in America. Tonight's underwriters are, and the Kansas City Public Library is an ongoing sponsor as well. And tonight's underwriters for this particular program are the Civic Council of Greater Kansas City, Kansas City Power and Light, the Mid-America Regional Council, and the Kansas City Public Library. So thank all of them, please. It's a particular privilege for me to introduce Hunter Lovins. She has been on the cutting edge, not merely of the green revolution, not merely of sustainability as a concept, but of bringing people together to make this work in our market-driven culture, to bring business and government and environmental activists together to make a model that for our country is really sustainable. And she's been a leader, maybe the most prominent leader in this activity. She is the founder and president of Natural Capitalism, Inc. and Natural Capitalism Solutions, professor at the Presidio School of Management's MBA in Sustainable Management. I noticed tonight I've already met 2 or 3 people who have just recently gotten degrees in environmental management, environmental science, environmental law. It's wonderful to see. Sometimes trends are trendiness is something to be stood against and to be skeptical of. But this is one trend I think we can all be grateful for, and it's great to see so many young people in the library who are intending to devote their life to what Hunter Lovins has devoted her life to. She co-founded with her then husband Amory Lovins the Rocky Mountain Institute. And she's become a spokesperson throughout the country and throughout the world for sustainability. She's an environmental lawyer by training. She went to Pitzer College, graduated with a JD from Loyola University. She was an assistant director of the California Conservation Project, otherwise known as the Tree People, visiting professor at Dartmouth. And she's taken this on the road in an extraordinary way. She's spoken to audiences including the United States Congress, the World Summit on Sustainable Development, the World Economic Forum, the Global Economic Forum, the Daughters of the American Revolution Continental Congress. She's spoken to the United Nations Development Program, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization Annual General Conference, the New Zealand Parliamentary Commission on the Environment, the European Climate Exchange. She's been on 60 Minutes, Bill Moyers, Good Morning America. and what must have been a really interesting conversation, Pat Robertson's 700 Club. We're here to bring people together at the Kansas City Public Library. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you will give a warm Kansas City welcome to Hunter Lovins, the Queen of Green, the Scheherazade of sustainability, and the Princess of pollution abatement.
Thank you all so very much. It is an honor to be back in the heartland. You know, when I was told that you have the ambition of being the greenest region in the country, I thought, well, they're going to have to come a-riding. Because you are not alone. Anymore, essentially every region of the country, from little Ojai, California, to the Pacific Northwest, to the New England states, has the aspiration to be the greenest. But after the day that I've spent today, you just might pull it off. Now, actually, I should not have been quite so surprised. This part of the world has some of the finest expertise in this field, and one of them sitting right here, Bob Berkebile. Bob's been doing this sustainability work since before there was a word for sustainability. And seriously, people are not recognized in their own home communities. You take them for granted, so don't take Bob for granted. Bob Mann, Bridging the Gap. And the work that Astra's doing, and the work that all of the organizations that were just mentioned to you who are supporting this series of conversations. Conversation is what's going to make the difference. Coming together as people and wrestling with these issues. That's what's going to make the difference. This is not something an expert can do for you or to you. It's not something that the next president is going to do. You know, reflect on presidents past, however good or bad they were, and how much time they had to make a difference and what they actually did or didn't do. The president's not going to do it. I mean, yes, it's important. Get out there and vote. I'm not saying don't vote. But if it is going to happen, it's going to happen in rooms like this, and it's going to be people like you. And it bloody better happen. When Royal Dutch Shell sets out to do what it calls scenario planning, it looks for what it calls drivers of change. These are signs that business as usual will not go on the way that it has. The answers that worked in the last century will not work in this century because we're facing some pretty scary drivers of change. We're losing every major ecosystem on the planet. We are in a global climate crisis. We get 10,000 more people arriving on Earth every hour. We're not short of people. We have record high energy prices. I believe oil today is at $102 a barrel and a little. And it's likely to keep going up there. Our entire infrastructure is vulnerable. Chindia, the combination of China and India. There's a new book out called Peak Everything. Because China and India are in the world market for every resource. And then what I call the sustainability imperative, and when I'm done you can tell me if this is good news or not. Now this is not all of them. There are a lot more on there. I just sort of start to run out of space. I mean, water, and I'll talk a little bit about water later on. It's one of those drivers of change. Collectively, these mean that we're going to reinvent every institution on the planet. How we manage companies, governments, civil society, because we're in trouble. I said we're losing every major ecosystem on the planet. You don't have to take my word for it. The UN Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, which is the science by a lot of scientists from most of the world's countries, concluded we have polluted or overexploited 2/3 of the ecosystems upon which life depends, to the point that the ability of these ecosystems to sustain future generations can no longer be taken for granted. Kofi Annan said the very basis for life on Earth is declining at an alarming rate. That's sobering. My friend, the business leader Ray Anderson, put it a bit more simply. What's the business case for ending life on Earth? And Bill Becker, who runs the Presidential Climate Action Project, on which Bob Berkebile has been helping, said if we insist on ruining the planet, we're going to have to stop claiming we're a superior species. One of the real challenges facing us is climate change. It is for real. It's coming at us faster than the models said possible. Now, yeah, the science is absolutely uncertain. We don't know how bad it's going to be, and we don't know how fast it's going to come. But here's the science I like. And it doesn't matter. Now, I say this with grave apologies to any of you fine climate scientists out there. What you're doing matters a great deal. But from the standpoint of policy, let's assume that the climate skeptics are right. This is the, 2% of the world's climate scientists who say that, well, we're not really sure if it's getting warmer or if humans are causing it. Let's assume they're right. Don't go to Vegas on those odds. But if all you care about is being a profit-maximizing capitalist, you'll do exactly the same thing you'd do if you were scared to death about climate change, because we know how to protect the climate at a profit. And companies are starting to do it. Some years back, DuPont announced they were going to cut their emissions of greenhouse gases 65% below their 1990 levels by 2010 and get 10% of their energy, a quarter of their feedstocks from renewables. Has DuPont joined Greenpeace? They made this announcement in the name of increasing shareholder value. They've done fairly well. They've already hit their targets globally for a savings to date of $3 billion. They're not the edge of the envelope. ST Micro may be. In the same time frame, they announced zero net CO2 emissions, carbon neutral, with a 40-fold increase in production. Now, when they made this announcement, when their CEO, Pasquale Pastorio, announced this, he had no earthly idea how he was going to do it. This is what Jim Collins, the business author of Good to Great and Built to Last, calls a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And it has driven their corporate innovation. It's taken them from the number 12 chip maker in the world to the number 6. So they've set even more ambitious renewables goals. They're winning awards. They reckon by the time they're done, they'll have saved about $1 billion. Now, of late, they're getting some help. The insurance industry has noticed. How many tornadoes does it take before the insurance industry is out of business, or Katrina-style hurricanes? So Swiss Re, the big European reinsurer, has started to say, if your company doesn't take its carbon footprint seriously, maybe our company doesn't want to insure you or your officers and directors. Imagine doing business without D&O insurance. And the banks are getting in on the act. They are starting to index bond issuances based on a company's carbon footprint. JP Morgan and now some others have announced a set of carbon standards by which they will judge companies. This little outfit out of the UK, little nonprofit, about 5 or 6 years ago started sending out a little questionnaire to the Financial Times 500 biggest companies on Earth, saying, what's your carbon footprint? And for a couple of years, everybody ignored it. If you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, you're going to answer a questionnaire by a little nonprofit? Of course not. 3 years ago, 60% of the companies answered. 2 years ago, 70%. Last year, 77%. Why? Well, for one thing, they now represent institutional investors with $41 trillion in assets. If you're going to go to the capital marketplace, you might want to answer their question. And for another, under Sarbanes-Oxley, the new U.S. corporate ethics law, if as a corporate manager you fail to disclose to shareholders information that can materially affect the value of the stock, you can be personally criminally liable. What's your carbon footprint? Last year, Walmart hired the Carbon Disclosure Project to go to China to ask their suppliers the same question. Now that might move the needle. This may have been the tipping point when the Republican governor of California announced a cap on carbon. Now this was thought to be politically, economically impossible. You can't just a government put a cap on carbon. They won't do it. Well, he did. Less than a year later, the rest of the western states joined in. Now, up in New England, the states created RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is a cap and a trading scheme. The state of New Mexico joined Chicago Climate Exchange. What's that? Remember I said we're going to reinvent institutions? When a bunch of us went off to Kyoto and helped negotiate the protocol, we were fairly chuffed. We thought we'd done it. We had an international agreement. Come home, the US Senate says no. Like, darn, what's it gonna take? This man, Richard Sandor, said, wait a minute, governments don't make markets, traders do. I'm a trader. He had a seat on the Chicago board. He said, let's make a market. He opened trading in December of '03 with 16 companies, ST, DuPont, the city of Chicago, my little company. He now has over 330 members, states, cities, counties, universities, big companies, all trading carbon in a country where there's no law that says you have to. Average reduction, 9% below their 1990 levels. We are told that it would bankrupt our economy for this country to abide by the Kyoto Protocol, which calls for 7% below 1990. The members of Chicago Climate Exchange have already achieved that, and they're saving billions of dollars. Because this country wastes $300 billion a year or more buying and burning energy that we don't need to deliver the services that we do want. Now, I'm not talking about freezing in the dark, curtailing, cutting back. I'm merely talking about energy efficiency that is cost-effective against current prices. We could save $300 billion a year, and we know how to do it. After the '79 price run-up, the last time oil prices were about what they are now, this country cut our use of oil 15% over 6 years, while we grew our economy 16%, just through better vehicle efficiency standards. So we now have the once triumphant American auto industry slumping towards the tank, while the auto industries in countries that have various forms of regulation are taking over the industry. What happened to capitalism? Well, we better find an answer, because our communities are bleeding to death trying to buy energy. This is an old number. This is before the prices went up. Typical community spends at least 20% of its gross income buying energy from outside the community. 80% of those dollars are gone. This is reverse economic development. So what's a community to do? Panic? Well, no. There are a lot of things that you can do. A group of us sat down and wrote a manual, which any city can implement. You can download it from the web for free. climateprotectionmanual.htm. This is a step-by-step description of what you do Monday morning to start implementing climate protection. And you're doing it here. I saw this afternoon the climate protection proposal for this area. It's very good. It's aggressive, but properly so, and it's very practical. And you are joining, this is a bad number, it's now over 750 cities that have signed on to the Seattle Mayor's Climate Protection Pledge to abide by the Kyoto Protocol. No city is too small. The mayor of Turtle River, Minnesota. The consequences of us not acting affirmatively are enormous. Mount Vernon, New York. It's been done in the heartland. Back in the '70s, a man named Wes Birdsall, who was the general manager of the Osage, Iowa Municipal Utility, hardly the hotbed of industrial innovation in the United States, did an interesting thing as a business person. He stepped across the meter to his customer's side to say, I'm going to help you use less of my product. Why would he do that? Because he realized you don't want a kilowatt hour of electricity. That's not what you're buying. You are buying the services that energy delivers. Cold beer, hot showers, industrial shaft power. If he can deliver you those services cheaper through efficiency than through any kind of new supply, in his case a coal plant, that's the business to be in. He wound up saving $1 million a year in this small rural town, cut energy bills to half that of the state average, unemployment to half that of the national average, because with the lower bills, more factories came to town. So what do? Set a goal. You guys have set a very nice goal. Salt Lake City has already achieved a 31% reduction below its 2001 baseline, and now has a goal of 3% a year additional reduction. Various other cities are setting different kinds of goals. Ottawa, Canada, 20% below their 1990 levels. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just go on the web and look for climate action plans. There are hundreds of best practices, from retrofitting city buildings, using the LEED Gold standard. I hear now your municipal buildings are LEED Silver, and some of them are even LEED Gold. Plug-in hybrid programs. There are incentives. If your builders don't know how to build green, you can create education programs for them. Smart meters. All of these programs will save you money. The city of Berkeley changed out traffic lights from ordinary lights to LEDs. They thought they were going to save about $56,000. They wound up saving almost $90,000. Scottsdale, Arizona has set LEED Gold as the standard for all new city buildings, solar panels, daylighting. The city of San Francisco is using biodiesel. Little Radnor Township, Pennsylvania, is buying wind power. The city all paid for it, and they installed a big wind machine. Flower Mound, Texas, an education program for the builders. Ferndale, Michigan, if you drive a hybrid car, you can park for free downtown. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. You like that one, huh? We like our cars, don't we? Here's my favorite. A city clerk in the city of Berkeley, California, noticed that you can create a special assessment taxing district for essentially anything. It's typically done to underground utilities or put in place a neighborhood cleanup. So Berkeley has now passed an ordinance that you as a citizen can go to the city, get the money to fix up your building, energy efficiency or renewable energy. It goes on your property tax. It's not a loan to you personally. So if you leave before the measures have paid back, it stays with the building. Berkeley has now been declared a Solar America city. That'd be a good ambition for Kansas City, become a solar city. And as a state, this is a pretty good measure that California had in place back in the late 80s. Idaho has just put it in place. So this is hardly revolutionary. What it does is to give the utilities a share of the savings that they create by paying for efficiency in your buildings. Now you'd say, wait, those are my savings. Well, no, they're not, because if the utility can achieve them by paying for it now, you haven't gone and gotten them. Those are $20 bills laying around on your floor. So the utility comes in, helps you pick them all up, gives you, say, 90% of them, takes 10% of them for its shareholders, everybody wins. When this was done in California, Pacific Gas and Electric spent $150 million in 1 year, got $50 million to give back to its shareholders. That leveraged 9 times that much saving for its customers. Over a 3-year period, over $2 billion in energy savings. Now, this isn't a us versus them. KCP&L has signed an agreement to help bring on energy efficiency and renewables. It's time for those of us who fought the old battles to get over it and to recognize that we have partners. Let's help them, they'll help us. By doing this, we can build a much healthier economy. Van Jones points out that investing in our communities, in efficiency and renewables, creates jobs. Dan Kamen at Berkeley has shown that investing in this new energy economy gives 10 times the jobs of investing in coal plants or nuclear plants. And these green jobs are already bringing over $1 trillion in revenue to our country. By 2030, it could be 1 in 4 jobs in this country. Green industry is now the hottest target of investment in the whole society. And these are not companies that are falling off in this recession. These are companies that are growing. Per megawatt saved in a community, you get over $2 million in increased economic output, over $500,000 in increased wages, increased business income, increased jobs. This is just good business. Let's unleash this new energy economy. Why are we in this mess? Nick Stern, who wrote the report for the British government on climate change, said that climate change represents the greatest, most widest ranging market failure ever seen. It is. Why haven't we fixed this problem? Well, because markets don't actually work like they're supposed to. Because we subsidize the old forms of energy. Around the world, $240 billion a year. Your and my tax dollars going to make oil, coal, nuclear look cheaper than it really is. Bill Clinton, however, pointed out that creating the new low-carbon economy can be the greatest economic boom since World War II. And we know how to do it. Study after study after study has shown. New one out today in Scientific American, showing that we have all the technologies we need to implement this low-carbon economy. This is a study by the American Solar Energy Association showing how to decarbonize the economy by 80% below 1990 levels by 2050 using energy efficiency and renewables. Where do you start? Bob, you know this. Buildings. He's been telling you guys this. Buildings. Most of us spend most of our lives inside of buildings. They waste a lot of energy, about 1/3 of total energy, 2/3 of electricity. They're responsible for a lot of the greenhouse gases, a lot of other waste. And typical indoor air quality is worse than the outdoor air quality that we pretend to regulate. And we know how to make any existing building 3- to 4-fold more efficient, new ones 10 times as efficient. The academics are catching on. Harvard Business Review. Owners of standard buildings face massive obsolescence. They must act now to protect their investments, greening their portfolios to meet growing market demand. This is now what the market is demanding. And Bob, I imagine you run off your feet with clients saying, "Oh, please build us a green building." It's a good time. And when you build a green building, you get a higher performance building. Qualities like daylighting. You put it into schools, you'll get higher test scores. You know, don't beat up teachers. Put the students in an environment where they can see what they're doing and hear themselves think. There's a reason Walmart's going green. Some years back, they conducted an inadvertent controlled experiment. They half built a green building. In fact, Bob, were you in on that one? Yeah. They lost interest halfway through. Go figure. Well, it's kind of cool because they have a half green side and a half non-green side. Surprise, the green side had 40% higher retail sales and all the associates wanted to work there. If you build a good green building, you will increase labor productivity, 6 to 16%. Avoiding the sick time that you get. How many of you have been in a sick building? Yeah. Or a building that is too cold in the summer because they have the air conditioning cranked up and you can't control it. $58 billion across the economy from sickness from buildings. Increasing labor productivity could give our economy another $200 billion. These are real numbers, folks. It gets better if you combine energy efficiency and renewables. And it's been done. Out in Sacramento, the people voted to shut down the badly operating nuke Rancho Seco. The utility lost 1,000 megawatts. But rather than build a coal plant or a big gas plant, they invested first in efficiency, then in every kind of distributed generation they could get hands on. They wanted experience with all these new technologies. It's now more than 15 years later and the numbers are in. The entire region is economically healthier than had they just run the existing plant. If they'd run the plant, rates were projected to go up 80%. They held rates level over a decade. This kept in place 2,000 jobs at companies that said the rates go up, we're leaving. They generated 880 new jobs and the utility paid off its debt. You can do this in any community. I mean, it doesn't have to be a badly operating nuke. Start looking at the existing fossil plants and shutting them down. We have net zero buildings popping up everywhere. And the American Institute of Architects has set a 2030 goal of net zero buildings. These are buildings that keep the people within them comfortable just because of good design, and that export energy to the grid. Big buildings, the new San Francisco Public Utility Commission. This has really cool technologies like urban turbines. These are little helical things that sit back from the cowl of the building in a windy environment and just spin, producing electricity. Of course, photovoltaics. And most important, it's an efficient building. It's real easy to jump to the exciting technologies. First of all, efficiency. 4 Times Square in New York City, flagship Condé Nast building. Energy efficient, uses half the energy of a normal building, looks like a normal building, costs the same to build, uses the energy that it gets from the sun in building integrated photovoltaics, solar cells on the south and west side, and a fuel cell in the basement. As a result, this building can never be turned off. So it's a high-performance building. They lease space in it at premium rates. You want to run your computers 24/7? Go for it. And in the 2003 Northeast blackout, it was the only place with light. People came from blocks around to camp out underneath it. Now, this is genuine homeland security. You think taking your shoes off, going through an airport's going to make you more secure? You're a fan of Disney's First Law, wishing we'll make it so. I said our systems are vulnerable. This is the US at night, the 10th of August, 1996, and 35 seconds later when a tree fell across a power line out in Oregon. Check it out. This is 9 western states and millions of people. Terrorists are a little smarter than tree limbs. So our administration tells us that the cornerstone of Homeland Security is to drill in the Arctic and send all that oil down through the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, assuming there's any oil there. This is TAPS when a drunk got after it with a deer rifle. He didn't mean any harm. If he'd have been one of the competent bad guys and blown one of the pumping stations lifting the oil over the Brooks Range and done it in winter when you can't get to it to fix it, you'd have had 800 miles of hot oil congealing into the world's largest chapstick. Homeland Security? Well, we are going to have to do something. Because here comes another one of those drivers of change. You really want to scare yourself, go read this book, Matt Simmons' Twilight in the Desert. Matt says that the world has hit what's called peak oil. Now, peak oil is a theory put forth by the Shell geologist M. King Hubbert. He said this in the 50s, that when you have a finite resource, and it's a corollary of the round earth theory that oil is finite, and you have growing demand, you fall off the production curve as steeply as you went up. This is the history of the supergiant oil fields. Matt says the world hit peak oil 2005. It might have something to do with why we have oil at $100 a barrel. Now, I do not have X-ray eyes. I don't know how much oil is in the ground. If Hubbard is right, if this peak oil theory is right, half the oil that was ever on Earth is still in the ground. There's a lot of oil down there. So when the oil companies tell you there's a lot of oil down there, if this theory's right, they're absolutely right. What's gone is our ability to produce it at the cheap price point. Matt Simmons says we'll have oil in this country at $300 a barrel by the end of this year. Whoa. I don't know if that's right. But a year ago, I bet a good friend of mine, Elliot Hoffman, who runs New Voice of Business out in California, that about this time of the year we'd have oil at $40 a barrel, based on the work of a man named Dan Jurgen, who runs a company called Cambridge Energy Research Associates. Dan said oil's effectively economically infinite because there's all that efficiency out there. As soon as the price of oil gets high enough, we buy all the efficiency. That damps the price, which damps demand, and so there's comparatively more oil. And at the point at which we exhaust all of that, well, there are all these substitutes. So I bet Elliot a bottle of very good whiskey that oil prices were coming down. Elliot was reading Matt Simmons. I am not going to bet against Matt Simmons anymore. What we do know, we use a quarter of the world's oil, we own 3% of it. So we import a lot, and in Jim Woolsey, who used to run the CIA's phrase, we're fighting both sides of the war on terror. We're paying for our guys, and then we buy oil from the guys who are paying for the other guys. We have our young men and women in harm's way defending access to what we like to think of as our oil. Oh, but there was a terrible dictator in Iraq. Yeah, well, how come we're not in Darfur? And I submit to you that if Iraq grew broccoli, we wouldn't be there either. Half the oil ever used, we've used since '84, 90% of it since '58. How many of you were alive in '58? Yeah, me too. So we there yet? If you want to get off oil, you deal with vehicles. I was on the podium with Richard Branson when he announced he's putting the profits of the Virgin Group for the next 10 years into non-carbon fuel. And last week he flew an airplane from London Heathrow to the Netherlands, partly powered with biodiesel. Now, you can make biodiesel in a lot of ways. You can do it at home, you can do it industrially. The Europeans are fairly big on it. It is really important that if we're going to go to biofuels, we do it sustainably. Because the way we're doing it now, corn-based ethanol, sorry, corn farmers, subsidized corn to ethanol, the way we grow corn, is wholly unsustainable. And the work of folks like Wes Jackson at the Land Institute, showing how you can use polycultures of perennials, might be a way to sustainably produce biofuels. I was up at Iowa State University talking to their bioeconomy program. They think you can efficiently co-produce ethanol and biodiesel, sourced sustainably, and then used in very efficient vehicles. Again, efficiency. Because really, the only way that we are going to cope with the oil problem is super efficient vehicles. And we already know how to build them getting 60, 80, 90, 100 miles a gallon. They're running around on the roads today. We can choose a world of energy efficiency and renewables. This is the only future that makes any sense for the rest of the world. It's the only future the developing countries can afford. And it will give us much more livable communities here at home. And guess what? It's happening. This country brought on 15 gigawatts of wind last year. Did you notice? A gigawatt's roughly a nuclear-sized chunk of electricity. We now have 100 gigawatts of wind power in the world. That's roughly the amount of energy we're getting from nukes. And in good sites, wind comes on cheaper than just running an existing coal or gas plant. Out in California, the county commissioned a 2.3 megawatt power plant on roofs spread throughout the county. The utility paid for half of it. It'll save the county $700,000 a year. And check out China. This is a megawatt grid integrated on a roof in China. The world's first green billionaire exists. He's a Chinese solar entrepreneur. Now, this is a very good thing. Les Brown points out that if China continues to grow economically at the rate it's been growing, and it uses resources as efficiently as we do, it's now fourfold less, by 2030 it's going to want more oil than the world now lifts or can ever lift. And more cars and cotton and concrete and coal and Okay, the future's not possible. This is this concept of peak everything. Well, when the future's not possible, you've just hit a driver of change. This is a real good sign that the way we did business last century is not going to endure. Happily, we have some help. Janine Benyus asks a very simple question. How does nature do business? Nature makes a wide array of products and services, very differently than we do. Nature doesn't run on big flows of fossil energy, it runs on sunlight. Nature doesn't make persistent toxins like nuclear waste that hang around for hundreds of thousands of years. It makes some dangerous things. You ever been in the vicinity of a black widow spider? But it biodegrades. Nature makes everything near to something that's alive at room temperature with no waste. The output of any process in nature is food for some other. And nature shops locally. Do you? Take these little guys. There are no doubt some of them here. They sit here at room temperature, eat flies and crickets, and spin a fabric stronger than steel, tougher than Kevlar. Best we know how to make Kevlar is boiling vats of sulfuric acid, high-pressure extruders. How do these little guys do this? Or the abalone sits off the Pacific coast in seawater and makes an inner lining right next to the creature's body that's better than the best ceramics we know how to make in very high-temperature kilns. So the guys at Sandia Labs said, wait a minute, we got to be at least as smart as an abalone. How's it doing it? So they figured out that the abalone excretes a protein that creates an electrically charged framework onto which seawater deposits out at the molecular level this very beautiful inner shell. Nature's also beautiful. So they took an electrically charged silicon substrate and dipped it in alternating baths of calcium carbonate and a polymer, which is what seashell is. And the stuff self-assembled at the molecular level just the way it does for the abalone. This is the future of industry. This is industry that's clean by design. So Homeland Security tells us that perhaps the next terrorist target is going to be the sewage treatment plants because of their inventories of chlorine. I guess the boys in Baghdad are getting good at chlorine bombs. Charming. This is a sewage treatment plant that was built in Burlington, Vermont. Vats of organisms selected from nature to do what they do in nature, detoxifying some part of the waste stream. You go to the brand new environmental studies building at Oberlin College and there's one of these, you walk in the front door, that's the first thing you see is the poop plant. The Body Shop had one. I hear you guys have a little problem. Let's see, what's the number? Get ready to pay Casey's $3 billion sewer bill. Don't rule out higher property taxes. A sales tax increase is possible. Watch your sewer bills soar. Come on, guys. This is not the answer. This is what the conventional experts will tell you. Put in lots of concrete. Let's get that water out of here. There's a different answer. In Curitiba, Brazil, this is not a rich city about the size of Houston, Philadelphia, per capita budget 1/15 that of Detroit, one of our poorer cities. Rather than build big concrete tunnels to get the water out of there, they had a problem. The city flooded every year. I mean, they had a real problem. Instead, they built a park. They kept the water where it was intended to be, as habitat. Now when it rains, the ducks float a meter higher, and the city has lungs, and they spent a whole lot less money. There are a lot of things to do to solve this combined sewer overflow problem. How about using water more efficiently? In East Los Angeles, where they were water short, and get ready for this, in climate change, you are going to have extreme rain events where you get a lot of water all at once, and then drought. And then extreme rain events, and then drought. In LA, they had drought, so they were putting in efficient toilets, except that the poor people in East LA didn't understand how to go about getting the rebates, so they weren't changing out the toilets. So the city partnered with a community group that hired its youth to go around and install the toilets, collect the rebates. They created jobs, returned $4 million to the community, saved over 3 billion gallons a year. All sorts of water-efficient appliances. How about capturing the rain? How about rain gardens? How about green roofs? How about rain barrels? This is very simple stuff. The Australians capture water and use it for all purposes. What we have done is design an urban environment where we have a lot of runoff. So let's design an urban environment that's intended to take the water in. Permeable paving, more parks. Using farmland. By the by, if you switch to organics in farmland, you sequester carbon. How about using urban green spaces to start sequestering that carbon? Wetlands, building wetlands in. Daylighting. We used to have streams. Remember when we had streams? We paved them over. Let's bring them back and let the water meander so that it soaks in. Much nicer neighborhoods. Using native plants that were designed to deal with big pulses of stormwater that have deep roots. Roof gardens. Nature creates conditions conducive to life. Here's what we do. These are the synthetic compounds now found in mother's milk. And for those of you who are fans of breastfeeding in all other forms of milk, aldehydes, ketones, phenols, furfural. People, what are we doing to ourselves? It's really worth answering that question. Nature runs a very rigorous testing laboratory in which products that don't work get recalled by the manufacturer. That's a cautionary tale for a young species like ours. So we asked nature, what do you think? How are we doing? I've talked a lot about technologies and what companies are doing. There's a very important role for government. Markets make a very good servant. They're not such a good master. They're a terrible religion. Let's think about it. Go back and read Adam Smith. Any of you know, by the way, what chair Adam Smith held at the University of Glasgow? The father of free market economics, wrote the book, The Wealth of Nations, talked about the invisible hand of the market. What was his chair in? Was he an economist? No, because he helped invent the field. Somebody said it. He was a philosopher. He was a moral philosopher. The whole theory of free market was written within the mental model that there is a guiding moral philosophy within which we do business. Because all markets were ever intended to do is allocate scarce resources efficiently in the short term. It was never intended to take care of grandchildren. That's our job. That's the job of a free people coming together in a democracy and saying, what do we want? What kind of a future are we going to leave to our children? I'm now a professor of a discipline that didn't exist when I went to college. The word sustainability was not in the English language when I entered college. And we now have degrees in it and professional societies. In fact, it was a bit of a quandary. Do I join the professional society? What is it? ISSP, International Society of Sustainability Professionals. Like, ooh, am I one? I figured, oh hell, I'll join. Because you've heard this phrase, yeah? Don't take a risk. The second mouse gets the cheese. We gotta be like this little guy. Let's strap on a helmet and go for it. But I am a professor of business, so is there a business case? Yeah, you ignore it at your peril. You may have heard the phrase, the triple bottom line. Business manages to profit. Sensible thing to do, being in business. So then along comes John Elking and says, no, it's a triple bottom line, not a bottom line, because you also have people and planet. So you bolt those on to profit as cost centers. Ooh, this is a tough sell. I think it was a great contribution when John introduced the idea, but I think we've gone a bit beyond that. I call it an integrated bottom line. This actually came out of Ray Anderson's thinking, where he said, you know, everything I'm doing for sustainability is actually enhancing shareholder value. So I said, oh, what is shareholder value? What constitutes shareholder value? Profit is obviously important. Superior financial performance comes in part by cutting cost, by enhancing profitability, by bringing new product to market. It also comes from reducing risk. If the insurance industry won't insure you because of your carbon footprint, that is an unmanaged risk. Companies are now being sued because of their carbon footprint. That's an unbooked liability. The ability to get and keep the best people. This is an incredible business asset in today's world. And the companies that are pledging to behave in responsible ways are finding that they're getting the best people. Increased labor productivity, build a green building. Cut your worker health care costs, drive your innovation, as ST found. Increase your market share, enhance your brand equity. Brand, in today's world, is everything to a company. What's Microsoft? Is it the collection of computers and disks that they're going to sell you? No, it's their brand. If you don't manage your brand, your company's at risk. Supply chain. One of the reasons Walmart's doing what it's doing is to better manage its supply chain. It has 60 to 90,000 suppliers. It doesn't even know how many suppliers it has. What it's really doing is trying to reduce the cost of distrust. Why did Walmart leave Germany? Did they pass a law? No, people didn't shop there. They didn't like what the company was doing. They didn't like their social policies. The companies that get it right will be first to the future. We're talking about the billionaires of tomorrow, because think about it. Go back to the first industrial revolution, when we invented commerce, using technologies like water power, making textiles. We then moved on to steam power, and trains and steel, and then electricity and chemicals and cars, then petrochemicals and the space race. Remember when the space race was the basis of our prosperity? The last wave of innovation was the IT revolution, gave us all iPods and PowerPoint. What's next? What are we going to do? What is our economy going to be built upon? Oh, well, I'm white collar. Yeah, well, an engineer in China can stamp plans for $5 an hour. Need a medical procedure? You're liable to be shipped to India. It's called medical tourism. Serious. What are we going to do? I think if we want to have a dynamic, growing industrial economy, we will invest in the technologies I've been talking about, in green chemistry and biomimicry, and energy efficiency and renewable energy, in the whole green economy. And we know that it pays. The companies on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index have been outperforming the general market. Just last summer, this was I think the first nail in the coffin of last century's way of doing business. Goldman Sachs, hardly your far left institution. The companies that are the leaders in environment, social, and good governance policies have 25% higher stock value than their competitors. This just in. The Economist, again, one of your far left rags, companies with the highest share price growth over the past 3 years paid more attention to sustainability issues. Those with the worst performance tended to do less. The link appears clear. Companies that rated their efforts most highly, their efforts in sustainability, saw annual profit increases of 16% and share price growth of 45%. Those that ranked themselves worst reported growth of 7 to 12%. High-performing companies put much greater emphasis on social and environmental considerations at the board level, while the poorly performing firms are far more likely to have nobody in charge of sustainability. This is the business case. Innovest has shown in entire industry sectors, forest and paper products, Electric utilities. Think about this one, KCP&L. That green line on top are the environmental leaders. The brown line are the environmental laggers. That blue chunk is the difference in profit. Who said this? There can't be anything good about putting all these chemicals in the air, about the smog you see in cities, about putting chemicals in these rivers in third world countries so that someone can buy an item for less money in a developed country. Those things are just inherently wrong, whether you're an environmentalist or not. Ray Anderson, that's a good bet. The CEO of the world's largest company, Walmart. Oh my God. Walmart has made some interesting pledges. They are dramatically increasing the vehicle fleet efficiency. They're going to double it over 10 years. They're investing real money in sustainability, cutting energy use in their stores, pledging to become 100% renewable energy, world's largest organic retailer, getting their products certified by groups like the Forest Stewardship Council, the Marine Stewardship Council. Why? Because they don't have a choice. The world's largest company is going green because it doesn't have a choice. They were growing like crazy in the 90s. In the aughts, their stock value has fallen off 30%. And they have critics. They also have competition. Tesco, Walmart competition from Europe, is coming to the United States. It's pledged to cut its energy use in half by 2010, start reducing air transport, and place little symbols on packaging, whether or not it was imported by air or whether it's local, and a system of carbon labels on every product so that you can tell when you go to a Tesco store, oh, this is a low carbon product. That's why Walmart's going green. This is the CEO of Tesco. I'm not a scientist, but I listen when scientists say that if we fail to mitigate climate change, the environmental, social, and economic consequences will be stark and severe. There comes a moment when it is clear what you must do. I am determined that Tesco should be a leader in helping create a low-carbon economy. I do not underestimate the task. It is to take an economy where human comfort, activity, and growth are inextricably linked with emitting carbon and transform it into one which can only thrive without depending on carbon. This is a monumental challenge. It requires a revolution in technology and a revolution in thinking. We are going to have to rethink the way we live and work. CEO of a major corporation. This is the best now of global corporate thinking. We are going to have to rethink the way we live and work. So what would a truly sustainable Walmart be? I spoke to the whole senior management at Walmart about a year ago. And I said, fair enough, you're putting solar panels on your roof and selling organic underwear. But if you roam the planet rapaciously, exploiting people in developing countries and in communities here at home so that someone like me can throw away more junk, this is not sustainable. So what would a truly sustainable Walmart business model be? And I said, fair enough, I don't have the answer, but I think this is now the question before you. And I said, it may come as a surprise to you, but you have critics, and I've been talking to them. People like Mike Schumann, who wrote the book, The Small Mart Revolution. And Mike said, that's an interesting question. Suppose every Walmart is in part owned by the community in which it's located. Mike Kleeman, who runs national strategy for Red Cross, said, suppose every time Walmart does a real estate development, it co-locates small, local, sustainable businesses that can piggyback off of Walmart's IT capacity, which is world-class, and its purchasing capacity. Suppose Walmart starts buying locally, starts locating its stores in urban centers. You know, think about it. We are going to have to reinvent everything about how we do business. So let's start with the Walmarts. And let's not be shy. The companies aren't. Companies issuing corporate sustainability reports are coming up like mushrooms after a rainstorm. It's a who's who of the corporate world. Even the academics are catching on. Michael Porter, the guru of competitiveness at Harvard Business. Managers must start to recognize environmental improvement as an economic and competitive opportunity. It's time to build on the underlying economic logic that links the environment, resource productivity, innovation, and competitiveness. I think these principles of what we call natural capitalism, of starting by using everything more efficiently because it buys time, it pushes off those drivers of change, and then redesigning how we make everything using approaches like biomimicry, and then managing our institutions to be restorative of human and natural capital. These are the basis of durable competitive advantage. But I think we have to go further. My old boss, Dave Brower, used to say, what do we want the Earth to be like 50 years from now? Let's do a little dreaming. Aim high, he said. Navigators have aimed at the stars for centuries. They haven't hit one yet, but because they aimed high, they found their way. You have the opportunity to aim high. Be the greenest region in the country. Aim really high, become the greenest region in the world.